Hey everybody, welcome to a very special episode of this. This is the first time we do this. This is going to be called Haunted Oklahoma after Jeff's book. Our special guest, Jeff Provine.
How's it going?
How's it going, man?
It's good. Here's the titular book.
There it is.
So Halloween is upon us, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I day job is professor of English over at Oklahoma City Community College. So I teach lots of composition classes, but also a few humanities like comparative religions, which is pretty fitting with spooky stuff.
Yeah.
And history of comic books, which is a course that originally I started doing over at University of Oklahoma, but brought it back over. So now we're having an OCCC too.
That is awesome.
Yeah, it's a really fun class, and it's only 8 weeks long, so I really want to jam a lot more into it than I possibly could. But I think it really does open up a lot of people's eyes, especially with Riverdale, the TV show.
Yeah.
People are always shocked to hear that Archie was a comic from the 40s that their grandparents read.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's a little bit different than what your grandparents were reading, but it's still pretty good.
Definitely. I remember getting those like Reader Digest size books of
Yeah.
Archie. Yeah, those are fun. Well, that's really cool, man. So, how did you get into writing about these ghost stories around Oklahoma?
Yeah, so I did study abroad in England, which every little town has its own ghost tour because they have a lot of dead people to talk about, like 1,000 years of history.
Yeah.
So when I got back, I started, looking around saying, well, we've been around here for a while, so there's got to be some ghost stories. And there are tons. We're jam-packed. It was unbelievable, which at that time I was teaching English over at OU. And during office hours, I'd kind of cast a net and see if anybody had any things, and started interviewing secretaries and folks who just in different buildings, and gathered up all these different stories. So in 2009, did a little charity walk there around campus, and originally it was just kind of friends and family, and then got a little bigger, did it again 2010 around Halloween, and then a little bit bigger 2011, 2012, 2013. We got on the news and had 150 people show up.
Wow.
So yeah, it was too big for a tour.
Yeah.
So it was pretty problematic, but still had a pretty good time. And so from there, the tours have just kind of been expanding as I've also gotten into the writing, because since it was on the news, it picked up on the radar of the publishing company. And so they said, hey, you have all these stories, like you should put them in a book. And I said, yeah, I should. And so I had this Campus Ghosts of Norman. So it's all just the campus stories, plus like Campus Corner, the stuff I didn't really tell on the regular tour. So like the guy who chopped his roommate's head off in 1996 and was busted putting a bloody backpack in a dumpster there in an alleyway. And the guy saw him and was like, maybe I should call the cops. And
wow.
Yeah. So crazy stories we don't usually talk about.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And so that I had so many different leftover stories about Cleveland County that I pitched a Norman book, and the publisher said, yeah, this is great. So took off, and it's just been growing ever since.
That's amazing. You've got like 5, 6 books now?
So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Wow.
8. Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a lot of ghost stories.
It's a lot, yeah, and it's still just tip of the iceberg. So after the Norman stories, I teamed up with Tanya McCoy, who's the paranormal investigator, and has a lot of like firsthand accounts of their investigations and things. I'm much more on the folklore side. I'm kind of recording it and giving the context of it and showing how this fits in historically with Oklahoma, but then also like how does this reflect on us as we're really interested in it. So why do people like ghost stories? And, just because they're really fun and stuff. But it's also really kind of a cool way to get into the history that we don't usually talk about. Like we've done a Guthrie, an Oklahoma City, and a Shawnee off of those. And like Oklahoma City, after the land run, it's been its first 6 months under martial law. Yeah, they had riots breaking out. These two different town governments kind of challenging each other, and they had to send in federal marshals and seize the town. And the Supreme Court eventually sorted out who was in charge. And like, I didn't know that until I started.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and like they should put that on the tourism bureau. So that's like awesome. So, so we talk about that stuff on the Oklahoma City Ghost Tour.
That's awesome, man. So how many of these tours do you do a year?
So I like to do them kind of while the weather's good. So usually get started about March and then go up through kind of mid-November. And try to do kind of once a month, so whenever people can get out. And here for October, though, we're going to do added up 12 tours. So downtown Norman, Oklahoma City, and teamed up with the library in Shawnee. We're going to do Shawnee 1 on October 15th, and also trained up a bunch of student tour guides over at OU, and they're scheduling some dates. So there should be lots of ghost tour opportunities.
That's awesome. How many people do you get like per year, more or less?
So that's a good, yeah. So it started off, initially we were just kind of using Facebook to spread the word and stuff. And Facebook was really pushing its events. So like I was having 3,000 people, maybe even 4 come in for like the 2015, 2016. And
Yeah.
then Facebook kind of changed its algorithm. So I've been adapting to that. And then 2020 happened and
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I'm probably shooting for 1,600, maybe 2,000 over the course of the year.
Okay. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, it's spread over years, so it's not too
Right.
bad, but it's still a pretty good sized number.
That is. Yeah, that's impressive. So let's get into it, man. Let's tell us some ghost stories. What are some of the ones that have really stuck out to you?
So the shocking ones. Um, Man, there's so many. Where do you even start? Which I guess one of the ghost stories that really blew me away is also like the cutest ghost story, which is the legend of the ghost dog at OU.
Hmm.
So, which the history of this, OU's first mascot was this little Boston Terrier dog named Mex, and they originally brought him to games in 1916 to chase off snakes and stray dogs during games, which apparently was a problem back then. Yeah.
Okay.
But he did a great job and was done with that. So they upgraded him to cheerleader, and they gave him a hat with an O on it and a big red sweater. And they trained him to bark every time there was a touchdown and to howl every time there was a kick.
Wow.
Yeah, and then when he passed away, 1927, they canceled classes for the day. 4,000 people came to his funeral procession down Lindsay Street.
Wow.
Yeah, and the Roughnecks were carrying this little black box, and they went and buried it at the 50-yard line so he could still come to all the home games because he was kind of a good luck charm.
Right.
And the legend is that you can still hear him and howl and do barking all during games, which I haven't heard personally,
Right.
but it's pretty loud in there. But I've had students who are football players, and several of them said they would be sitting there on the bench, kind of letting their hands dangle, and they'd feel the dog come up and lick the sweat off their fingers, and jump up saying, "What's the dog doing here?" Never see anything.
Wow.
But the one that really got me was a sports photographer, got a giant telescopic lens and everything. He spotted me one time and said, "Hey, you do the ghost tour on campus. You should check out the stadium." So I have dogs at home, so I know what this feels like. But I'm standing there taking pictures, and I feel this little dog come up and leaning against my leg, kind of chilling out with me. And I look down, and there's no dog. So you think there could be a ghost dog? And I said, "Well, let me tell you about Max." And whole thing all came together for him.
Wow. So that dog's still buried there till today?
I mean, they've redone the field so many times that I don't know what would be left. But that's his final resting place. So if whatever's left is there.
Wow. See, I would have thought that because they've redone the field that it would have been gone. But yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, which gets into kind of a weird question of, does the body physically have to be there, or how does the energy attach, and all the kind of metaphysics stuff that I don't think anybody actually knows. And
yeah.
If they did, they'd probably make a lot of money off of it.
Right. But that kind of clues you in, though. It's probably anchored to the area then, geographically, and not, or emotionally, if that's where he was happy at.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which, I mean, you get a lot of ghost stories of people, especially they're on campus. So many people come through, but like not a lot of people actually passed away there just because, it's healthy 18, 19-year-olds. But then a lot of the old dormitories and stuff talk about being haunted. And so I like to think that some people liked it enough to come back and visit and check it out. And that's what EUPs do. Or Professor Bogus, who used to play the organ at OU and comes back and still plays the organ, even though there's not an organ in the building. It's just organ sounds. And attending student performances, making appearances despite being dead for almost 35 years now. But she didn't die in the building. That's where she worked, so she still shows up.
So, like, people have heard like this music playing?
Yeah, I've talked to lots of people. So on the Holmberg Hall, which is the old auditorium and now part of the Reynolds Performing Arts Center. They say typically up on the second floor you'll hear organ music playing and stuff, which that's one of the 3 legends. They also say she slams doors on people. So when you're practicing working away there, the door will slam shut on you, interrupting you and making you go back and do better. Which the weird thing about that is that people, typically keep doors closed while they're practicing because you don't want to bother people in the hallway and vice versa.
Right.
So the door swings open and then it slams shut.
Ah.
Yeah. But then most famously is she likes to sit in the balcony while students are giving performances. And I've talked to 3 or 4 dozen people who claim to have seen her up there. Including one of our very first ghost tours ever. This young lady in the front just started bawling, like tears pouring down her face. And I said, "Are you okay?" And she said that she had given a clarinet recital there a few weeks before the ghost tour, and which, recital. So friends and family came, but there was this little old lady up in the balcony and nobody knew who she was. And now they knew, and she was not comfortable with that.
Yeah. That'd be a shocking revelation.
Yeah. So you never know what you're going to find out once you start digging.
Yeah, definitely. So what's one of the scarier ones you've seen around campus?
So the scariest story on campus for sure is the legend of the exorcism back in 1973, which everybody's like, what? And so it wasn't a campus building at that point. It was a boarding house that previously had been a sorority and a fraternity, but the fraternity got kicked off campus, and so it became a private boarding house. And I got this story out of the Oklahoman where this student was getting attacked in his room. He was getting choked, waking up and feeling pressure on his chest and voices in the darkness whispering at him. And so they got the president of the New Age Center of Oklahoma City at the time, Charles Rhodes. He came in as a medium and could communicate with spirits directly. And so the article talks about going through the house and detecting all these little things. And then finally in the student's room, he says that there's the spirit that looks like a cute little blonde gal with a name like Nadine Boulding, and starts, telling her you need to move on and all this. And then she says, I don't want to, and I want to stay here, and I don't want other people here. So she gets her ghost friend Frank from the basement to come up and scare these guys off. And he says, well, you're hurting people, so we could ask you to leave if we had to. And she says, if you try, I'm going to rip your heart out.
Oh, wow.
Yep. Yeah. So they say, okay, definitely time for an exorcism. And so they cleanse the building and so forth. So, which is where the article ends and where that chapter ends. It is interesting. I got back through the old Sooner yearbooks, and back in 1936 and 1937, but not 1938, there was a member of that sorority that whose name was Nadine Boulding, or her name was Nadine Bowles. The Nadine Boulding was what the guy had detected. So kind of spooked me out for a minute, but found out she actually gotten married and moved back to Texas. So that's why she wasn't in the sorority photos anymore. But in addition to, we're kind of talking about attachment and stuff, there's a lot of other stuff out there that isn't necessarily human. And so you get this story going, and things can kind of slip in there and start feeding off the energy and doing bad stuff.
Right.
So, which I think has happened several times in different fraternities and sororities. There's another sorority that we don't talk about on the tour because their ghost that they call Bob said, oh, it was a guy who died in the fire in this building back when it was a fraternity and all this, which nobody died. There was a guy who got injured, but nobody died. And however, they tell the story over and over again, and they try to scare the freshmen saying, this is your room and all this. And but yeah, I've had all kinds of weird stuff. Students of mine talked about light bulbs blowing out, the refrigerator getting unplugged, knives getting thrown at them in the kitchen, and all kinds of crazy stuff. And the house mom was just like, don't talk about it. Don't let it have any energy. Just keep away from it.
Just ignore it. It'll go away.
Yeah.
Wow. Knives throwing, huh?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Which another sorority, they didn't have a ghost up until they started messing with Ouija boards and stuff, and then
I'll do it.
Slipped in there too, and started pinching people, is what I was told. So, which could also just be a legend and like people pinching you and you turn around and you're like, oh, that wasn't me and stuff, which would be
Right.
pretty hilarious.
Yeah.
But then, I don't know, I've talked to a couple of girls who said they were on the stairs all by themselves when it happened. So maybe there's
I
something.
guess pinching is better than getting a knife thrown at you, I guess.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good step in the right direction.
Given the options.
Yeah.
So what about Norman? What kind of stories is coming out of Norman?
Let's see. So, one of my big favorite Norman stories has kind of evolved a lot since we got the ghost tour going. So, downtown, we have the Midway Barbershop, which was originally the Davis Brothers Barbershop that they founded in 1893. So, I mean, coming up on its 130th anniversary next year. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
it's changed hands, but actually only changed hands twice. There's been 3 owners through the entire years, which is pretty cool.
Wow, that is cool.
Yeah. Um, So it started by Sherman and Otho Davis, and the younger brother, Otho, committed suicide there in 1923 after a whole bunch of financial problems. And the legend is that he's still there and moves stuff around. The barbers say that like they'll have combs or trimmer guards or something, something tiny just disappear, and they'll look for it and they're trying to find, did it fall on the floor? Did somebody borrow it? Like what's going on? And nothing. Finally, a couple weeks later, they'll turn right around and they'll be right back there on the bench where it should have been. So crazy. Or decorations set up on the wall for years at a time, and then not just fall off a shelf, but like fly across the room for no reason.
Wow.
So, which all this movement and stuff, and then making appearances. They say like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, somebody will be driving by and they'll see all these shadows in there getting haircuts. And come by the next day and say, hey, what are you doing giving haircuts at 3 in the morning? And the guy, owner who was telling me the story, said that whenever that happens, he'd just say, nobody put any money in the till, so it's not my business. Which is very pragmatic.
Yeah.
And then once we started doing the ghost tour, people started taking pictures, and so forth. And we've gotten, 5 or 6 with this guy wearing a brown hat and a brown long coat standing in the back of the shop.
Wow.
So, yeah, I guess he's hanging out still.
That's really cool. Like during the tour, they're taking pictures and they're catching this. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah, and they're watching us. So, and one ghost tour, the apartment upstairs is now all storage, but somebody was watching and the curtain moved back. And the next 2 ghost tours were across the street because, I like ghost stories, but I don't want to be in a ghost story. Just tell me what happens afterward.
Right. That's awesome. What else? What else is out of Norman?
Let's see. Coming out of Norman, we also talk about kind of weird history stuff like you wouldn't expect, such as one of Al Capone's lieutenants settled in Norman. Like his wife was from Norman, so they retired to Norman. And I always talk, tours, I'm not making this up because nobody would believe me because who would Al Capone's lieutenant in Norman? That's crazy, but it's a true story. Yeah, guy, he bought a piece of land over on Highway 9, Kitty Corner from Brindle Corner, which is his wife's maiden name, Mary Brindle. And he lived out there for a few decades, and he, his wife, and their daughter are all still buried there on what used to be the property on this big marble mausoleum. Which is kind of weird because today it's rental house, and this marble mausoleum standing out there in the trees. And so I went out to take pictures of it from the road, and one of the neighbors came out and said, "What are you doing?" And started talking about stories and stuff. And she said that every once in a while they'd see people walking through the trees, which was kind of weird. But they would be wearing old suits, which was especially strange. And so the legend is that, the true story is that back when he was living out there and retired, they would invite a bunch of their gangster buddies to come out for what they called fishing trips. And they'd come and, hang out for a week and go hunting and fishing and swimming and all kinds of good times. And then if there was somebody that they needed to disappear, they're out in rural Oklahoma, so it's not too hard.
Right.
And so the legends are that they're still kind of hanging around wherever they were last buried.
Wow.
So keep an eye out when you're walking around on the Blackjack Oaks out there.
Definitely. All right. So what about Guthrie?
Guthrie is spook capital of Oklahoma. Yeah, which kind of talking about that latent energy type thing. I mean, Guthrie, after the land run, that was the town. It still has about the same population it did when it got started. all the business and money flowed in there, and then the train came in south through Oklahoma City, thanks to the city leaders of Oklahoma City. They knew what they needed to do. So then all the economic attention started shifting down there. And then 1911, we had the election to move the capital, and like Guthrie just, basically froze in time. Everybody moved out. And to this day, they just, block after block of Victorian buildings. They say it's the largest historical neighborhood in the United States, or historical district in the United States. So, which is kind of cool because, like,
that is cool.
That's ours, yeah. And you can go see it and hang out. And they do awesome things like the Victorian Walk every Christmas. You go out there and check out the territorial Christmas story, and check out all the different shops and stuff. And they have a ghost tour, which the Guthrie ghost tour I got started about the same time mine did, but like they next leveled it, so I've been trying to catch up with them. Got a chance to meet with them again a couple of weeks ago, and we were filming some stuff for Channel 9, and they Stacy, the lady who runs it, said they had 66 stories, so they kind of mapped out different routes depending on what people wanted. I'm like, that's a lot of ghost stories. 66.
That is a lot of ghost stories.
Yeah, I'm like, that's the walking tour, so who knows what else is around town, like the famous Stone Lion Inn and different bed and breakfasts and stuff. So they have so many awesome stories. So highly recommend Guthrie Ghost Walk. Go check that out. They do tons and tons of tours. They try to do like almost every weekend year round.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you ever get an itch for a ghost story, Guthrie Ghost Walk, go check, just Google that and get their calendar, and they'll be happy to see you.
Cool.
And no shortage of stories, so you can go 3 or 4 times. Yeah, which, I mean, could probably do a second Guthrie book if Stacy wanted to. I'll have to talk to her about that. Maybe that'd be next year's book project.
There you go, part 2.
Yeah. So, and tons of stories, like the one she was sharing with us was about a grocer, and so this guy had a grocery, and of course the Guthrie Ghost Walk goes out to the grocery store that is now, I think it's auto parts and stuff, just kind of specialty custom cars things, and told the story that she had gotten from the descendants, which was the grocer himself was sick, and or his wife was sick, so he was off taking care of her, and his staff was the clerk and the stock boy, and this African American gentleman walked up the street from the Elbow, the old island that sticks out there in the middle of Cottonwood Creek, and he's carrying this wooden box of all these awesome eggs, like different bright colors and everything, and he's like, hey, I got these eggs, I need to trade them for some milk. And the stock boy is like, well, we're not supposed to make purchases. That's kind of his thing. And like, and he's like, well, I don't want any money. I don't have any need for money. I just need a bottle of milk. And they said, well, shoot, just for a bottle of milk, like these eggs are amazing. Like this, we should be giving you like 2 or 3 bottles. Like, no, it's too much, just one. And so they said, all right, and swapped the bottle out, and got these awesome eggs, and all the ladies of Guthrie saw him and went nuts over him. And he toddled back off, and day after day, this guy kept coming up, refusing money for it, just straight up, just one bottle of milk and so forth. And they're like, this guy has got to be up to something. So they eventually sent the stock boy out to go see what was going on, and followed this guy down, and he went to this little house out there on the island, and there was a big chicken coop in the back and so forth. So he's like, okay, well that's where it is, and sneaked off again. And then he stopped coming, and they were like, well, what's going on? And so, because all the customers want these awesome eggs as we and so forth. So they finally sent the stock boy out there, since he knew where the house was, and went up and knocked on the door, and the door opened, and this little African-American boy, and looks up at him and starts yelling, it's him! It's the guy who brings the milk! And everybody, and like, all these other kids run out and start screaming, and he's like, what are you talking about? I'm trying to find the guy who gives the eggs. And they're like, well, we don't know anything about eggs. And, finally was invited inside, and everybody's super excited, and the mother's there, and the father is an invalid in the back. They found out that a few weeks beforehand, when this whole egg thing got started, the mother had gotten a telephone call. Her husband had been working up in one of the oil fields and had an injury, which of course back then you didn't really have workman's comp and stuff. So like, if you got hurt, you'd you're on your own. So she went up to go take care of him until it was enough to get him back home, and just kind of left these kids. And she just kind of gave them enough stock food that they could get by, but you couldn't, of course, have fresh stuff like milk and eggs and things. So she, was just blown away that this guy had seen their need and he had stepped up and, just given to these kids while she was so away, because she didn't know it was going to be that bad, but like he saw him through these couple of weeks. And he's like, I have never seen these kids before in my life. I have no idea what's going on. Yeah. And so, it got to the point where it was kind of awkward because they kept trying to thank him, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then as he was kind of excusing himself, he saw a picture sitting next to the door, a photograph of the guy who was carrying all the eggs, this old African-American guy. And he's like, no, that's the guy who's giving me the eggs, and he took the milk. So he's the one who's giving me the milk. And they're like, no, you brought the milk. And besides, that's Grandpa. He passed away 20 years ago. Like, you can't. Wow. Yeah, he can't bring us anything. And then the mother, of course, said, well, but he always swore that he would take care of things if it ever came down to it. So, and talked about how good of he wasn't getting chickens to lay. So.
That's a cool story.
Yeah. So not all ghost stories are spooky or
right.
I mean, a little bit spooky, but like in a good way.
Yeah, definitely. Almost like a guardian angel.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Really cool. You got more?
So Guthrie got tons of stories, which that's a happy ghost, and
right. Yeah.
Just trying to think, is his name Al? But I got the book right here. So Haunted Guthrie, which Tanya had all kinds of horror, awesome kind of first-hand account research things, which I guess Miss Kate's room would be a good description. So one of the bed and breakfasts up at Addison Suites was brothel back in the day, which you're like, oh, that's scandalous. I can't believe Guthrie had a brothel. Like, the whole town was brothels back in the day. Like, it was unbelievable. Go to any building, and they're like, yeah, probably at some point. And a lot of them, like Miss Lizzie's, like, they clearly, like, they're not even going to pretend. Like, yeah, these apartments have to be brothels. Like there's no even trying to get around it.
Right.
So they just kind of lean into it and like, oh, yeah, Wild West and fun and stuff. But, like, that was a major part of the Guthrie economy, because he had all these people coming in from the territory, the legislatures, business guys, like all these business deals. So,
wow.
There you go. Yeah. And Tanya wrote up her experience of they went to one of the bed and breakfasts, and all kinds of strange stuff were happening. They had a person get shoved and a shadow figure show up, and she was sleeping in the front room and woke up, and there was this tall African-American guy standing there, and he said, this is Miss Kate's room, right? And Tanya was like, yes. I'm sorry. So she walked out, to go get somebody else to make sure, she's not just dreaming and stuff, comes back in and nobody's there.
Wow.
But in one of the back rooms, they did kind of an experiment to see if they could get some energy flowing, and had their male member of the team lay down on the bed, and they put a $5 bill on the table, and, they were just like, if you're here, you know what to do and all this stuff. And he is laying there saying, it's kind of weird. I don't know if this is the right thing to be doing and so forth. And then he jumps out of the bed and he's like, somebody grab me. And he walks out of the room, and don't need that ghost stuff.
Yeah.
A little bit too much. So all kinds of ghosts out there.
That's crazy. What about the Skirvin Hotel?
Oh yeah, famous. Probably Oklahoma's most famous ghost story now, since the NBA ties in.
Yeah.
Which on the Oklahoma City Ghost Tour, that's our last stop, so we kind of stand out there in the plaza and get the full glory of really awesome hotel, right? Built 1911 and originally only 10 stories tall, and then up 13 stories in this whole tower, and kind of a really cool encapsulation of the boomtown days of Oklahoma City, and then kind of the ne'er-do-well struggles through the 20th century and the big oil crash in the 80s and how it sat empty and stuff. And now it's back, right? And we've got Hilton setting up there, and they restored the lobby to the original 1911 style. It was very, very gorgeous. Yeah. So, which the famous story there is the ghost they call Effie. right? Which they say she appears wearing a chambersmaid outfit, which actually, gosh, this was 3 4 months ago now, but had a lady come on an Oklahoma City Ghost tour, and afterwards she stopped me and said, "Oh, I saw her." And I was like, "Really? Tell me," because I'm always up for hearing a ghost story. And she said that a few weeks before that, she and her husband had stayed up there for their anniversary, and she's a paranormal investigator, so she really wanted to have an experience and stuff. And so she set up all her equipment. She's been watching and trying to bait and all this, do this stuff. And finally, it's like 4 in the morning, and her husband, has been humoring her this whole time, but he's really just like, I don't believe in this stuff, so I'm going to bed. You should probably go to bed too. And so he goes off, and then she's standing there, and she's like, yeah, it's probably just a legend, and she's exhausted and all this stuff. And so she turns around, and there's this lady, pretty lady, dark hair, wearing a maid's uniform, like they say. And she said she wagged her finger at her and then disappeared. And she's like, all right, that's the encounter that I wanted. Do not doubt Heffy, apparently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm digging out of the sports pages. Everybody's got stories. The Knicks, the Bulls, the Lakers, the Suns, like everybody. It got to the point where some NBA players just refuse to stay there. Which
really,
yeah, they go. They get free hotel because part of the team and so forth. But then they were like, no, you keep the room. I'm going to go stay over here and stuff. So which is too bad because they should stay there anyway. I've talked to lots of people who the best night's sleep they have. It's
right.
Weird stuff out. I don't know how to detect when she's going to get you or not, but other people have had weird stuff. A guy talked about how he's laying in bed, kind of just watching TV, cooling down. And then at the foot of the mattress, everything depresses, like somebody sat down on it, but there's nobody there. And he's looking at it, thinking that's pretty weird. And then it starts scooting up next to him, like someone's coming up to cuddle with him. And he's like, nope, not needing that.
Yeah. Now, is that all taking place on the 10th floor? That's what I heard. Like, that's the only floor that's like haunted.
Right. Well, I definitely wouldn't say the only floor because she's not the
Okay.
only ghost there, but the most famous one. And
Okay.
so that 10th floor used to be the top floor, which that's where all the presidential suites are. So, we built them at the top of the hotel, but that was the original top, and they just added on to it. So a lot of people say that was Mr. Skirvin's girlfriend back in the day. That's the big urban legend, is that he was carrying on with her, and she was going to have a baby, and he freaked out and said, I can't be found as an adulterer. It's going to ruin my station in Oklahoma City society, and locked her away there. And the story goes that she swaddled up the baby and was trying to get out the window, which some people say she was going to try to get up on the ledge and then onto the roof where she could get out the back stairs, which, it used to be the roof, so pretty easy to do. Other people say she was so despondent with her situation that she just stepped out, and so whether slipped or purposefully fell those 10 stories and down to the concrete below. Or so the legend goes. There's a couple of problems I have with it. One is that I've never been able to find any newspaper archive research about it. And so, there should be an article about a woman and child falling out of the Skirvin Hotel in downtown Oklahoma City. But I've never been able to find anything. Which, of course, you'd say, well, Mr. Skirvin's rich and powerful. He's going to keep that out of the papers. But that's back when we had rival newspaper factions. And Mr. Gaylord, who was not a fan of Skirvin, would have loved to put that right on the front page of the Oklahoman.
Right.
But he didn't. So another problem, the exact same story happens down at the hotel in Mineral Wells, Texas, which is just down the train line. So I think maybe the stories got misconstrued. Because another part of it is that Mr. Skirvin freaks out and says, I can't be found as an adulterer. It's going to ruin my station, Oklahoma City society. But his wife had actually passed away in 1908, 3 years before the hotel even opened.
Okay.
So he can't be an adulterer. He's a widower, so by definition. And he's definitely rich enough that he can marry whoever he wants. Which he did in the 30s. He married his secretary. He was like 40 years younger than him. So, yeah. Rich people problems, I guess.
Right. So if the 10th floor is not the only place that's haunted, like what else goes on? Lower floors.
Other stories I've heard about it, and Mr. Skirvin himself likes to hang out sometimes in the lobby, but mostly down in the basement. They say they'll see the chair all scooted out, and they'll have cocktail glasses stacked up underneath it, like he used to do. There's said to be a little boy wearing, some people say it's like Sunday clothes, but it's kind of like what kids used to wear in the 30s and 40s, just dress shorts and a button-up shirt. and he's just running full tilt every time people see him. They say opening day is when they first saw him, 2008. They were all in the lobby and having kind of a big pep rally before opening up, and this little kid runs out from the cafe and wiggles through the crowd and goes down in the basement. They're like, well, who's bringing your kid to this thing? And nobody had, so they went after him. Couldn't find him. Searched the whole place up and down. And to this day, you'll be walking along one of the hallways. This little kid will just be running straight past you, and if you try to keep up, he'll get around a corner and then gone.
Disappear.
Yeah. So,
Wow.
Yeah. And then Phantom Baby Crying, which people say, oh, that's Effie's baby, but it's not just the 10th floor. It's all through the hotel. People wake up, they'll call the front desk and say, hey, this baby's been crying for like 3 hours. Come get DHS to come pick it up or something. And like, they'll apologize, of course, and so forth. They'll try to look up and see who checked in with the baby, and nobody had.
Wow.
So it happens over and over again, all over the place. And then Mr. Skirvin's daughter, Pearl Skirvin Mesta, who she and her husband Mesta Park's named after. So since her mother had passed away, and Oklahoma City, luxury hotel is the Skirvin Hotel, it needs a hostess, so it fell to her, and she was the hostess for kind of Oklahoma City society for years, and Oklahoma State society, and then married big industrialist from Pennsylvania, Mr. Mesta, and moved to Washington, D.C., and then she became ambassador to Luxembourg and kind of got NATO going with a lot of her parties and organizations and things. So they say that she's making appearances through the hotel, kind of floating around looking at things. And talked to several people who claim to have seen her, but nobody has ever said they actually talked to her. It was just kind of so intimidating that they just like let her go.
Yeah. So you mentioning the baby crying makes me think about the Crybaby Bridge.
Oh, Crybaby Bridges. Yeah. We have buku of Crybaby Bridges. 16, I think, was my last count.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they're all over. And everyone's like, oh, this is the real Crybaby Bridge. I'm like, oh, a lot of Crybaby Bridges. So, I mean, yeah, I live in Norman, so you just go up Sooner Road, and there's Crybaby Bridge over on Air Depot. Or you can go on Highway 9, and there's one over south of Tecumseh. They're all over the place. Which I want to say I made a list of them in the Haunted Oklahoma book.
So which one's the original one, in your opinion? Doing your research.
Kind of a good question. So the urban legend about usually it's a mother and child. Sometimes the father's there too, but they're going over the bridge during a storm and they get washed off, and then it's days before they're discovered. And so you can still hear the crying baby to this day. But like it's not just in Oklahoma; it's all over the place. So all these crybaby, which I hate to think that there's that many people who died in storms, but I mean, maybe. I don't know where to get started. I mean, I guess you could like go to the most historical one, because we've got ones in Sand Springs, Alderson, Heavener, Kellyville, Catoosa, Pryor, Schulter, Waletka, Moore, Texoma, Lake Overholder, and 2 south of Tecumseh, because there's another Crybaby Bridge a little bit farther on. So there is no shortage of Crybaby Bridge, and like which one's the original? Like,
right.
So which skeptics are like, well, it's because the wind blows underneath and it sounds like crying babies. But then like, why isn't every bridge a Crybaby Bridge?
Right. So
maybe it has something to do with angles. Bigfoot researchers like to say that it's not actually crying babies; it's just the sound that young big feet make. So that's why they stick around those points. I don't know about the original, but the most documented one is Dead Woman Crossing out in Weatherford. So that story, which really documented, let's see, that was, I'll make sure I don't get it wrong, 1905. So Mrs. Katie James, she took her infant and left her husband, who was pretty abusive. So she was on the train. She was heading up to go to her parents' place and never arrived. And so, her father came back and looking for her, and like all these, and the conductor, punched the ticket. They saw her and stuff, and she's just not there. So he got a private investigator to try to figure out what was going on with this. And he followed the route and traced it. And there in Weatherford, found out that she had gotten off the train and was picked up by another lady, and they took a wagon out. And so he like traced where they would have gone and ran into this farmhouse where started asking around, we've seen this woman and child, and the family there said, well, we didn't see a woman, but we have found this kid out there covered in blood.
Oh, wow.
A woman in a wagon dropped him off and said, take care of him with, just gave him to one of our kids. I'm like, what? So, and then the investigator teamed up with the sheriff, and they've tracked this lady down in Shawnee. They got her, and they brought her in for questioning Shawnee PD. And she kept changing her story and all these different things. And like there was a guy that chased them, or they owed this guy some money and they were trying to escape, and like all this other stuff. And then just round and round and round for a couple hours. Finally, she asked if she can, go use the restroom. And they're like, of course. And she goes, and that doesn't come back. And so they go knock on the door, and they finally find her. She had a bottle of poison that she slipped herself. So like. Wow. Really escalation. So
yeah,
I don't know what the motivation for this was, because they said a robbery, but she had like $12 on her, so not any good for that. Maybe she had said that she was carrying all this money or something. I don't know, but they'd known each other beforehand, and I guess she just enticed her out there, and they took like 3 months to find the body. So like they went out and did a search and didn't find anything. And then a couple of weeks later, some guy is out fishing with his kids and runs across this decapitated body, and then the head kind of nearby. So you can still go out to Weatherford, and Dead Woman Crossing, this big, nice bridge, has lots and lots of barn swallows on it, just all up and down. It's like mud caked underneath to the point that it's probably structural integrity is holding it up.
Yeah.
And they say you can hear the baby crying, and you can hear her crying. You can hear gunshots, and you see her kind of as a blue glowing figure, sometimes with her head, sometimes holding her head.
Oh, wow.
And kind of walking amongst the trees there.
That's creepy.
Yeah. And so that's 1905. Like, you can go look in the newspaper archives. That's where I got all the research for it. And, like, that's wild.
Okay, I don't want to keep you, and we're almost at the 45-minute mark. Is there one more story you want to tell us?
One more story. So... gosh, where even to start? Well, I guess going back through the newspaper archives, right? Because I, like to dig back and see what the historical stories are, in addition to interviewing people, and what's the modern stories and things too. One of my really favorite stories, way out in northwestern Oklahoma, is the story of the Phantom, right? Which I had no idea about this until I started kind of digging around trying to find what stories people might not actually hear so often out in Fairview. So 1919, late November going into December, the whole town is besieged by this phantom of this gaunt lady with really pale skin, wearing a black dress, black veil, and she just moves through the town. Like, not every night, but a lot, to the point that people are locking their doors, but she peeks in the windows and then slips inside.
Wow.
And passing through walls and freaking people out. And the police get involved, and they start setting traps for her. And because they're like, oh, it's some guy who can pick the locks and messing with people, but like she just walks through these traps and like nets and stuff that they're Looney Tunes style going after her with like bear traps, and nothing. She just goes right through them. And it peaks, and then it starts descending again on all of these appearances and spooking people and scaring off horses and everything. And so people started coming out of their houses again. And at a Christmas party, a bunch of young folks gathered around and playing games and stuff. And then she comes out of the floor, just rises up, and there's this black cat circling her feet. And she raises a gnarled finger and points at one of the girls. "You have my cat." And the girl just starts bawling and screaming, because like she has no idea what she's talking about. All this crazy stuff. And like one of the guys jumps and tries to tackle her, and she vanishes, and he just lands on the floor. And that's the last appearance. Just disappears. And like,
wow,
nothing. So but then I kept reading on the newspaper, like, is there going to be anything else? Does she reappear like later on? What's going on with this? And like March of the next year, they have in, where is, I want to say Milan, Missouri, so 450 miles northeast for no reason, same thing starts. The same descriptions of this phantom woman passing through walls, just spooking people.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's a lot more investigation here. Like, is she on the line? Did she come somewhere before? Where'd she go after? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Episode of Supernatural right there.
Yeah, it is. And what's that story called? Is that just the Phantom Woman, or?
Yeah, that's what I just call it the Phantom. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Oh, that's really creepy. I never heard of that one either.
I know. Yeah, there's all this weird stuff that you never hear about, but I definitely, from experience, like whenever you start talking about ghost stories, even the people who are like, "Oh, I don't believe in ghosts," they're like, "Well, but this happened to me," and it's like, or my grandma used to say, or all this. And everybody's got some ghost stories, so I've really enjoyed taking on this project of trying to get as many, uh, urban legends and ghost stories and things that have never been written down or are in sporadic different places, trying to put them all together so we can have a kind of cool record on what we've got here in Oklahoma.
Yeah, definitely, man. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
Ty Ranger says, "Hey guys, can't stay long, but want to stop by and say hi." That's right, Ty. We're done. We're wrapping up. You have to watch the replay. All right, Jeff. Well, I really appreciate you coming out and talking about this. This is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks so much for inviting me. This has been a lot of fun telling some stories.
Yeah, definitely. I want to do this again sometime.
Sounds good to me. I always got more stories to tell. So I'm always interested in hearing stories. So reach out. I'm just on Facebook at author Jeff Provine or Twitter at Jeff Provine. Pretty easy to find.
Awesome. And I put your link down in the description. So, guys, if you're watching this and you're curious about his books, the link's in the description. So check them out.
Great.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching.